it's going.
Okay, excuse the joke, but we now have 3 sets of tubes with our 6 ions in them. First set reacted with the ammonium carbonate, although I substituted sodium carbonate for it. The second set reacting with the ammonium hydrogen phosphate, and the last set reacting with the ammonium sulfate. And in every set, let me show you these. In the first set, we've got 6 tubes. The first 2 have a precipitate. Clearly that first tube there has quite a precipitate in it. The second tube is not so visible, but you can tell it has precipitated out. And the last tube is cloudy as well. It has an insoluble precipitate falling out of solution. These 3 are clear as a bell. I'm not sure what that means, but there's no precipitate in there. In the second set, again, the first and second tubes have precipitates in them, and the last tube has a precipitate in it. And we have the third set, which the first 2 tubes have precipitates, but the second tube doesn't have much of a precipitate. The middle 3 clearly have no precipitate, and the first and the last, tube 1 over here, tube 6 on the end over here, have very clear precipitates. The second tube has a precipitate, certainly when you compare it to one without, but we're going to follow our instructions, which say, for any test tube in which you observe precipitate formation, warm up the solution by placing the test tube in the boiling water bath for up to 5 minutes and record your observations. I think I clipped it off, for which you observe no precipitate formation. And so what they want us to do is see if heating these will give us a precipitate. So I'm going to use my test tube clamps and add these to my boiling water bath that I have set up. Problem is, I haven't labeled them, so let me label them. Not with a pen, but with a Sharpie. And we'll wait 5 minutes for these to heat up. I want to move ahead a little bit and start giving you some clues to some of the questions, and that is, if you notice, in every group, it was the first, the second, and the 6th tube that formed a precipitate. We're going to see if we can get more of a precipitate, or sometimes boiling may dissolve something and cause the precipitate to go away. In that second tube where we had a really light precipitate, and we'll check the other tubes to see if a precipitate forms after they've been boiling for a couple of minutes. The difference between these 2 metals is that some of them are group 1A metals with a +1 charge, and those are the lithium, sodium, and potassium, and the others are group 2 metals, and that would be the barium, calcium, and the strontium. Those metals are all group 2, and they're known as the alkaline earth metals. You can see I've set up a boiling water bath with the boiling chips as we discussed in the previous video. I'm boiling these for a few minutes. I have the ring stand set up with the wire gauze on top. I'm using test tube clamps to pick up my tubes. Only thing I'm not doing well is using adequate eye protection, but I have a choice. I can read my instructions with my reading glasses, or I can wear my goggles. But since I'm going to be taking tubes out of the boiling water bath, I'll put my goggles on right now, as I should. Okay, and to the magic of video editing, our 5 minutes is up. I'm going to turn off my flame at the petcock. Notice it's still boiling, still hot. That iron ring on the ring stand and the metal gauze hold a lot of heat. I'll start pulling my tubes out one at a time. This one is number 5. No change. This one is number 4. No change. Still no precipitate, no visible reaction. We actually, in your records, you're going to write NVR, which is chemical shorthand for no visible reaction. Tube 3 has no precipitate. And finally, tube 2, which had a very small light precipitate, but is now set in boiling water, has a very strong, very heavy precipitate. So whatever reaction occurred between the calcium and the sulfur and the ammonium sulfate, not the sulfur, but the sulfate ions, has become much more dramatic with a very heavy precipitate. Okay? So we will go from here and record our results and move on to part C in the next video.